Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be making one of these forest themed clay heart pendants, and this is an old photo. I don't have these ones anymore. I do have these ones though that are very similar. They are just a little bit smaller and I cut out the center a little bit differently. I will be using several different colors for this tutorial. So for the heart itself, I am using brown. I will be using this green for the moss. My main mushrooms I will be doing with red caps, and then I will be using white for the stems. And for my smaller secondary mushrooms, I have chosen this bright orange color. You can use whatever color you want for your mushrooms. For tools, I have this dotting tool, and this is actually designed for nail art, but I use it a lot for clay pieces. I have my straight pin as always, and I will be using both ends of that. And I will also be using a toothpick. And then you will need an eye screw to put in the top of it to make it into a pendant when it's done. And we're going to start with brown clay for the heart itself, and we're just going to do 2 balls about the same size. And just like my stitched hearts, I am just going to be rolling one end of each ball to a point to form 2 teardrop shapes, and then I'm going to fit those together to make the heart. And now we can fit these together to form our heart shape, and you're going to want to squeeze these together pretty snugly. You don't want to ruin the shape, but you do want them to adhere to each other in the center. So just press them together and then lay them down, and we are going to press the rounded tops in just a little bit. And then we are going to be using the straight pin to close this seam. So take your straight pin, and we are going to be using the rounded end of it, and you're just going to push that seam into the center on both sides, just pushing it in, and then make sure you get around the bottom, and we are going to do the same thing with the other side. And now that we've got those seams pushed together, we're going to go ahead and smooth everything out. So smooth out this area where you pushed in your seam. And then we're going to go through and, smooth out the backside and round off all of your edges so that we have a nice smooth heart shape. And now that it's smoothed and shaped, we are going to take the ball end of the straight pin, and I am just going to mark out the circular hole in the center. So I'm just pressing in the shape of the circle, making sure to get it nice and even, and you don't want it too large or too small. Just cover this center piece of the heart here. And now that we've got the hole marked, we are going to come in with the toothpick, and if you kind of lay it on its side, we are just going to dig out this extra clay here in the center so that we have a nice hole. So just push everything into the center with your toothpick, and once it's up there, you should just be able to thin it down on the end until it rolls right off of there. And using the ball end of your straight pin again, we are just going to come in and press this in so that it's smooth. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, just get rid of those rough spots. and then go through and smooth out the edges of the hole and the other sides of the heart if you happen to touch them or get marks on there. And then we are going to start texturing the inside of the hole before we add our mushrooms. So to do that, just take the pointy end of your straight pen, and we're just going to be making a series of kind of stippled lines on the inside of the hole. And they don't have to be perfect. Most of this isn't going to be seen on the finished piece, so just get your lines in there so that we have some texture. And now we can begin texturing the rest of the heart, and we're not going to do all the lines. I usually start in the middle, and we are just going to be making some wood lines, main wood lines on the outside surface of the heart. And the middle ones are pretty easy. You're just working lines in there. Once you get to the outside though, you want them to look natural. So obviously you don't want lines that are too curvy or too straight. The trick is to kind of get your pin in there and then just kind of relax your hand and let that needle go where it naturally wants to with the groove of the heart. And now that that's done, we can start working on the center part of the heart. We're going to work from the center out, and we are going to start with moss. So take some of your green clay and you're just going to roll it into different sized little balls, and we can trim these down as we need to use them. Just get plenty of them to do the whole piece. And we are going to start with some background moss texture in the center, and then we'll put our mushrooms on top of that and then do the rest of the surface moss. So just take one of these small balls of clay and we are going to just roll it into a little bar. And then we are going to set that inside of this hole here. And I like to start right on the edge. So I'm just going to place this where it's sitting right inside this edge here and press it in so that it adheres to the brown clay. And then I'm going to do another piece just off the other side. I don't want to do the whole center, so I'm just doing the bottom part of it here. Once you've got the green pressed in there, you can take the needle end of your straight pen and texture that moss. And to do this, you are just going to be using small circular motions, shallow circular motions. You don't want to go too deep. And once you start doing this, you'll kind of learn how to manipulate that moss and make it look like you want to. Sometimes it takes a little more effort if the clay is thicker in places, but just really carefully, again, small circular motions to make your moss and just push that around in a way that looks natural. And now we've got a nice textured mossy center, and we can start working on our mushrooms. So set this aside, and we are going to take some red clay, and again we're just rolling this into small balls, and I'm gonna do 2 or 3 mushrooms, so I'm just gonna make some different sized balls, and then I will pick a few that feel like they're the right size. So I think that this little one is a good size. I'm going to set that aside, and these ones are a little big, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this one in half and make it smaller. And these look like good sizes for my mushrooms, so I'm going to use those. Get rid of these. And now I'm going to take my white clay and the same thing, I'm just going to get a little ball and then roll it out so that I have something to use for the stems. And again, I always tend to make more than what I need so that I have plenty to work with. I'm going to do 2 of these, and I probably won't use them both. Now, to do your mushroom caps, you are going to take the dotting tool, and it's small on one side and larger on the other. So we're going to use the large side for the larger mushrooms. And you're just going to use that dotting tool to poke a small hole in the center of your mushroom cap and kind of roll it between your fingers on the top of that ball so that you get a nice mushroom shape to it. And you're just going to repeat this with the other one, and we will be using the smaller end of the dotting tool for this little tiny one. And now we can prepare the stems for our mushrooms, and I can already tell that this one is too fat, so I am not going to be using that. I'm going to take this one, and this should be plenty for all 3 mushrooms. So I'm just going to roll it out nice and even and point both ends. And then I'm going to cut this into 3 pieces, and I'm going to go small, medium, and large, just like my caps. So now that our stems are made, we have to get the top of the stem into the bottom of the cap. And the easiest way to do this is to place the mushroom cap first. So I've got my cap here on my straight pin, and this is my largest one, and I am just going to place it where I want it in the center of the heart, very gently. And then I'm going to take that straight pin and I'm just going to pick up the stem as well. Just pick that up and very gently push that into the bottom of the mushroom and then scrape it off on the moss there. And you're going to repeat that process with the other 2 mushrooms. Here's all the mushrooms, and you can see that the base of the stems looks a little bit rough, and that is fine because we are going to go through and fix that up with some moss. So go ahead and grab some more of those little green balls that you made, and this one I am just going to roll out nice and thin, and then I'm going to cut a small piece of this off to go through that one crack just below the mushrooms there. So I'm just going to take a small piece off the end here, and then you're going to want to turn that around so that the pointed end is facing down. And we are just going to place this here and then push the rest of it into this this crack, this wood line that we made here on the surface. Just like that. And then this ball is a little bit big, so I'm going to trim it down, and you're just going to take a small ball of clay and drop it in there. And you can see that I've kind of got it on the edge. So you want to kind of push it forward so that you're not putting direct pressure on your mushroom stems because you can mess them up. And texture that moss, and now you can see that it looks very pretty and natural, and all of those stems at the base there that looked rough are covered up. So before we start on the rest of the moss, we need to finish our wood texture here. And before we do that, I'm just going to go through, and you're going to want to make these lines that you already made, just push them in and make them a little bit deeper and more defined because these are our main wood lines. So I'm going to go through and do that with all of these lines, and this is what it looks like. And now we can start making these secondary lines, and you're just gonna follow the same concept that you used to make the first ones, but very shallow. We're not going super deep on this. And again, just pull that needle down and let it go where it wants to. Don't try to force it. if you've got a wider section like this, you can kind of do it in an oval shape with pointed ends, just like that. And then you can take where they meet at the bottom, you can just take those and follow it down as a single line, just so it looks natural. And you don't want any pieces, you know, or lines too close together or too far apart. This is what it looks like after it's all textured, and now we can begin adding the rest of the surface moss. And when I do this, I usually start from the center and work my way out, and I just kind of stagger them randomly on the piece. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab my green clay, and then I will get all of my pieces pressed on and then show you kind of, you know, how they look when it's all done before I texture them. So here it is with all of the moss on it, and you can see that I just kind of staggered these around. None of them are super close together or too far apart, and most of the moss is in the center here, and I did take some strips and put them along the edge of the hole and then up here on the top as well. And I didn't do the whole thing, only where we put the moss on behind the mushrooms. And when I texture this, I am gonna pull these outwards and down a little bit so that they look natural like moss would. And this is what it looks like when it's all textured. And as a final step, we are going to add some of these smaller secondary mushrooms. And I have chosen this bright orange. And once again, we are just gonna start by rolling this into balls. And I just start with some small ones and then trim them down into smaller sizes after I'm done, so that I have several different sizes to work with. And once you've got a good amount of these in different sizes, we can start placing them on the piece. And I usually start with some of the larger ones, and just like with the moss, we are going to start in the center and work our way out. So I'm going to start right here at the base, and when you're putting them on the moss, you just want to press them on very, very gently. You don't want to mess up your moss texture as you're doing this. Don't worry about adhering them, just get them placed. And once you've got them all on there, you're just going to take your dotting tool and you are going to poke in that center. And this is going to make them look like tiny little mushrooms, and it is also going to help to adhere them to the clay beneath. So just go through and press in every one of them. You might have to use the smaller end of the tool on the little tiny ones. This is what it looks like, and once you've got that done, this is ready to put our ice screw in, and then we can get it baked. So when you're placing your ice screws, you want to put them right in the center, and that's why it's really important to make sure that your seam is pressed together really well. So you're just going to take your ice screw and line it up right to the center and press it in the middle. And now that our ice screw is placed, this piece is finished. It's ready to go in the oven. So you can check your specific clay for baking instructions. I am going to bake this at 275 for about 15 minutes. And this is what it looks like out of the oven, and I am not super happy with my colors on this, so I'm going to go ahead and hit it with some paint. And to start with, this is just a drop of black and a few drops of water, and I am going to paint the whole piece with this and then wipe it off with a damp cloth. And I'm going to do it in sections so that none of my paint dries before I have a chance to wipe it away. And the idea is that the black paint is going to settle into those cracks, and then when I wipe it away, it's going to stay in those cracks. So I'm going to wipe it away on the surface as best I can, but I am going to leave the black down in the cracks, and that'll give us some definition on the finished piece. This is what it looks like, and I am just going to continue that for the rest of the piece. And here it is, and now I've got some white paint on my straight pen, and I am gonna just go through and very carefully put some tiny dots on these red mushroom caps. And now that the mushrooms are spotted, I am just gonna highlight the rest of the piece. So I'm starting with a lighter green here that I am gonna use for the moss. And to highlight your moss, you just wanna kind of dab this very lightly on the outside edges of all of that moss. And this is what the moss looks like. And next I am going to use a lighter kind of bronze color to highlight the wood. And you just want to brush this on here very lightly. So I've only got a tiny, tiny little bit of paint on my brush, and I am just kind of brushing it on just on the surface of the piece. And the last thing I'm going to do is highlight the mushrooms, the tiny ones. So I have this really bright orange, and you don't want to get the paint inside the mushroom. You're just putting it on the edges here, and just get all of those done. And then this piece should be finished. This is the finished piece, and I really like the color. I like the shine on the wood. I like the highlights on the moss. Very pretty. Now, as a final step, you will want to seal this with a thin layer of Mod Podge if you used paint. If you didn't use paint, then Mod Podge really isn't necessary. Now this piece was pretty simple. I try to keep my videos as beginner friendly as possible, but if you want to add more embellishment to these, you can add some vines or branches, and tiny leaves and flowers are also a really great idea. Definitely feel free to play around with different colors and types of mushrooms. And you guys can do these on any shape that you want. These are some round flat shapes, and these are actually available for sale in my Etsy shop. And I have done more of a bark-like texture on them and paired them with some really pretty stones. All of my shop links can be found in my bio, and I've got a pretty extensive collection of handmade and print-on-demand products, so definitely check that out. That is it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed making these. If you have any questions or comments regarding this tutorial, please feel free to leave them below. Next week, I will be making these mini mixed media keychain books. So if you are interested in more clay tutorials or other arts and crafts, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next week on Wednesday.